to the very simple, description of self-regulatory physiological processes and function. That was not what Neal and Reich meant. And the issue of who has priority here, probably Reich is the one who introduces the concept historically of self-regulation as a central function of not only clinical practice but of social development and social involvement. Neal picked it up and used it because of his close and intense relationship with Reich. But Neal was much more interested in another concept which is central to what we're looking at, which is the concept of self-governance, okay? Which is really Neal's contribution. And both terms tend to be, if used at all, used very, very loosely and not in the context that either one of these terms was developed by the people that we're talking about. So in terms of a basic working definition that we want to use for the discussion or for the presentations today, and Dr. Bennett and Dr. Coley will have their takes on this. To work that, is to look at what we're really trying to look at is the range and function of what constitutes natural behavior in a living organism. And for Reich, that meant a living organism in a real environment, in a natural environment, and not necessarily a human organism. So for Reich, it was never a question of looking at human behavior versus amoebic behavior or the behavior of a sea otter or a whale. It was simply looking at life function. So the basic definition starts with the idea of what is natural function, in a sense, what Reich often used the term, what are our roots in nature? What are the basic functions of living matter, or what he later talks about in character analysis and in function of the orgasm and in other places, the expressive language of the living, right? And fundamentally, self-regulation, as Reich is really using the term, is a description of the definition. Really, fundamentally involves essentially the description of the function of living organisms in a natural environment, or the expressive language of the living, of any living matter. Okay, and if you read in the literature, in Reich's particularly character analysis, or some of the later work on cancer biopathy, he is just as comfortable, and well, this is often what disturbs a lot of very, very rigid mechanical scientists. He moves very freely between talking about functions of human organisms sexually and moving then to the amoeba at the same time, and then moving from that to a description of a dog or a puppy or a kitten. It really is, for Reich, it is fundamentally all part of the same issue and the same function. And to the extent that we've lost that, right, as organisms, we've lost a basic natural right, a basic natural inheritance, and that is tragic. If we were as simple as a one-celled organism, we lose it, you die. I mean, we've made it more complicated. We lose it and suffer in some way, and cause extensive suffering, and that's in some sense fundamental to what Reich and Neal and many others around them were trying to address. It should be kept in mind that Reich and Neal were not only popular, but the movements that they emerge out of and the movements that they helped shape were broadly based, and if we held such a conference or colloquium as today, during the 40s or even probably 50s, this room would have been packed. I would have had to buy a lot more bagels, or whatever. But that's the nature of history. Okay, so Reich at one point talks about when I started looking for an actual definition, I somehow assumed that I was just I hadn't looked at this for a while. I assumed I was just going to go back to one of the glossaries and it'd be a nice, simple definition. And as is typical with Reich, he tended not to define things that were central in simple, direct terms. You know, I mean that were fundamentally, deeply embedded in what he was doing. So actually, it turns out you have to really read through to find out what he is talking about when he talks about self-regulation. And one of the interesting places where you get some of the best information is in, which is a wonderful book anyways, which you all should know about, which is Record of a Friendship, which are the letters of Reich and Neil, in which they share a great deal of thought and fairly spontaneous response to what they're both working with and how and why they're addressing certain issues. Reich talks about the natural flow of life with its ups and downs. So in one sense, and he elaborates at different times, that one of the things about self-regulation is it's not about what you do or how you do it. It's about just following the natural flow of the living with its ups and downs. I thought that's interesting. What's an ups and downs? You know, we call ups and downs feeling good, being really excited, being really expansive, and being down as being depressed and unhappy. I think central to what Reich is talking about is that it's just natural, and I think we live in a society where most individuals, certainly in American society, have real problems, particularly with the downs. You know, as if there's something fundamentally wrong about being down. You know, so what underlies that is Reich's fundamental understanding that life is about pulsation, right? The orgasm function in the most basic sense, but underlying the orgasm function, it's pulsation, expansion and contraction, up, down, and it's natural, it's fundamental, it's a flow. And provided that the flow doesn't get interfered with, and provided that the organism is capable of surrendering to both the expansion and the pleasure of the expansion, and not only tolerating but living through and processing the contractions which are absolutely necessary to maintain, you know, expansion, then you have natural function or a self-regulating organism. Usually, most people, as they become constricted, become very, very anxious both with expansion and very anxious with contraction, and often take a position one way or the other, either to moderate both extremes by somehow freezing themselves right in the middle, or choosing one position or the other. I'm going to stay always expanded, right, or always contracted, either always anxious or always depressed. Yeah.
Just add, where you're using the expansion contraction and making a parallel to the up and down, I'd suggest the up and down would be more pulsation, not pulsation, rather than expansion contraction. Because expansion and contraction would both be healthy.
Yeah, well, I'd have to see where he says that the down would be not pulsation. That's not the reading that I've seen. He seems to talk about ups and downs pretty much in the way that I'm presenting. But I mean, it's possible that at another point, Reich has a tendency often to talk in different contexts in different ways. I've never seen that reference.
Speaking more orgonomy in general.
Yeah. Well, it's not my. I mean, if speaking in orgonomy in general, then I would not necessarily see that as. I mean, I would see it pretty much in the context that the ups and downs are part of a various way of understanding for Reich of expansion and contraction, or pulsation.
Wouldn't ups and downs tend to refer more to the external situation?
Both.
And then how you...
No. I think it's very. Again, he doesn't give exact, reference. He is talking about how the individual living organism experiences the ups and downs, and certainly, and that's the other factor. The environment is fundamental to how. What ups and downs we experience, right? So it's warmer, we have the windows open, there's noise in the street that produces an environmental circumstance which is going to affect our experience. He's aware of this, and I think we have to pay attention to that. I mean, it's easy to romanticize the deer in the woods, but the deer in the woods, if you ever watch the deer